is Vlad. This is how I normally introduce the shows. If you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. What we have been doing for all of this year is we've been doing recaps of the themes that we've just finished. And in the month of March, my months are starting to get difficult, Vlad. In the month of March, we went over and did data-driven sustainability, sponsored by Phoenix Contact. So thanks again, Phoenix, for going and doing that. We had three great Phoenix guests over two shows. We'll absolutely go ahead and get into that. But if you're new here, we are super open, free form, both on our recap shows and on our live shows. Our live shows are Wednesdays, typically at 4 o'clock East Coast time, but I think almost every live show in the month of April on Wednesday is not going to be at 4 o'clock East Coast time for a variety of reasons. Having said that, guys, please feel free to go ahead and push some stuff into chat. We will go ahead and bring in as many comments as we possibly can, both during this show, during live shows, and kind of forevermore. Having said that, I'd like to officially welcome everyone to Manufacturing Hub. Again, I am Dave. This guy over here is Vlad. We are on episode 106. We've done 106 of these, which is kind of crazy. Today we're doing some recap on data-driven sustainability. Again, hello everyone in the chat. Having said that, again, I'll give kind of a brief overview of what we started data-driven sustainability with the concept of, and then we will see how we've built over the course of the last month. So as we were talking to the folks at Phoenix, the concept of data-driven sustainability, right, at its core, it is IIoT with a purpose, right? And for me, I feel like that very much hits home as to, hey, if we're going to go do an IIoT application, there should be a reason why we have it, right? We shouldn't just throw a bunch of technology up, throw a bunch of sensors and see where it sticks. And we've had some very interesting conversations, especially along the lines of energy and energy monitoring. I think that is a very good and easy first step for virtually anyone looking to get into IIoT. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. So episode 102, we had Chris on. Chris, founder of Mr. IIoT, had kind of a very open conversation about IoT. Vlad, I want to go get you in here early and often on the show. So what were your kind of like main takeaways from our conversation with Chris?
Yeah, so I think that Chris brought a very good perspective from someone who's actually doing these field integrations on the plant floor. So he talked, again, I don't think the focus with Chris was specifically on energy monitoring, but just a broad sense of IoT and what kind of projects he has worked on. One interesting thing, I guess, that I do want to mention, so we've briefly and vaguely talked about one of the items that he's looking to release, which he has now since released, and it is a tool that allows you to monitor a sensor. So essentially, you take in your M12 connector, you plug it into a digital. I'm not sure if it's analog capable as well, but for sure on the digital side, you can plug in a sensor and you can send that data directly over MQTT via an Ethernet. So it has an RJ485 cable at the end of that module. And so you can directly feed that into like an ignition or any broker for that matter that is capable of reading that data. So I think that he certainly brought a lot of really interesting points. I think that he spoke with candidness, right? So Chris, once again, gave some examples of projects that he worked on. He explained how difficult it is to gather that data on the production floor side. So he talked a bit about making sure that the data is contextualized and how I want to say challenging it has been for many groups to come in, understand the process, deploy the architecture that me and Dave have talked about many, many times, and ultimately be able to synthesize that data in something that makes sense on the business side. What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think that it was interesting. I would also like to point out one of my favorite parts about having Chris on is that he had his business partner or colleague Chris also there, who was in the background, who we got a couple of answers thrown in, kind of from left field. We've had that happen a couple of times. All of those times certainly make me smile when that happens. Having said that, I think one of the biggest things with Chris, kind of at the very beginning, the conversation about what is IIoT and how no one really has an agreed upon definition of what it is. I think that that in particular is what makes IIoT projects exceptionally difficult to go deliver and to go deliver successfully, is because we don't have agreed upon, hey, we're looking to do. Most of the time, people are coming in and trying to order, hey, I want one IIoT, which is always
Well, how would you
exceptionally difficult.
define IoT, Dave? If I can interject a question
Sure.
in there.
Perfect. So I would define IIoT or IoT exceptionally broadly, right? Typically, IoT or IIoT has a sensor. We are taking sensor data. We are maybe not exclusively, but almost exclusively put up to the cloud, in which we're capturing a number of pieces of sensors data in order to visualize the data and help people draw conclusions. So,
Do you
without
bundle software in there as well? Sorry to
absolutely.
interrupt. Do you bundle like so? Yeah. Okay.
IIoT is a hardware software combination play. You
Mhm.
cannot. How can we have Internet of Things without software? How can we have things or sensor data without sensor? I don't think you can. Like even if you were to go buy a smart fridge and you could go set your smart fridge up on your Wi-Fi to go look at it through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or whatever, you still need the hardware in the fridge and the software that lives on the cloud, right?
Mhm.
So, from my perspective, IIoT has to be a combination of hardware and software. But beyond that, I feel like there is very little specifications of things that IoT or IIoT must or must not be, which makes it very difficult. Which, when there's a customer that says, hey, Vlad, I'd like an IIoT, you're like, okay, I mean, we can certainly do that, but what problem are you trying to solve? I think that
Mhm.
goes to the pain point of platforms, right? Like there are lots of people who are looking to purchase or using to or looking to leverage platforms, but because a platform is you can do anything, it's great because you can do anything, but its near critical downfall is you can do anything. And because you can do anything, it means you have to make the decisions on what you want. And many of us are not the best in being able to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I guess in my mind, having worked with a lot of field devices, I still see the label being primarily aimed at a piece of hardware that obviously has firmware on it that allows it to talk via primarily Ethernet, right? It could be Profinet, any
Mhm.
protocol that can get that data to the cloud for that matter. But I think there's a lot of ambiguity, as you said, what is, let's say, IIoT and then IIoT platform, right? And to me, the
Yep.
IIoT platform extends it maybe to sort of the edge software than the solutions that you have in the cloud versus if you just tell me we have an IIoT capable sensor, well, to me, that's just a piece of hardware that, again, obviously runs firmware on it to function. But that doesn't necessarily imply by default that it has capability and like a cloud solution partnered with it, unless, again, the vendor has a platform paired up in there. But anyways, I think that there's certainly a lot of debates to be had, and I think to different groups it may be slightly different. But I think we all
Mhm.
agree that ultimately it is to get that data out of the hardware. It is to be able to see that data. It is to be able to make business decisions at the end of the day. So whether you say it's pure IoT or it's IoT with some data processing and data visualization layered on top, I think it all boils down to the same at the end of the day for me.
Absolutely. I guess let me ask you a question on Chris's device, the one that you
Yep.
mentioned. I think you said its name was Shark with a C. Um, so you said it was a device that could take any digital or perhaps analog sensor, go connect into, I'm just going to call it a box, and leverage MQTT as a transmission protocol, or plug into any RJ45 and assumably via a number of protocols go and uh pull it back into a server. Um, do you see that as super novel, right? Like, does that solve problems that you are seeing?
I would say so in general, yes, right? And I would like the caveat that I would put is if you're a very large organization and you have the engineering capability to design an edge solution that will, let's say, siphon out that data from a PLC and send that to a MQTT broker, then you're probably not going to buy this, right? But if you're a smaller manufacturer, if you don't want to have an entire consulting firm of engineers getting involved, and you just want something really quick and easy to get into the cloud, and again, you want to make decisions based on how many cases are passing by a single sensor, then I think that solution is for you, right? So I think there's definitely a market for it, but I think you need to evaluate what kind of data you're trying to get before you make the purchase decision. And I don't have the full information on what the pricing is. If I'm not mistaken, you can pre-order it right now, and I'm actually going to look at the website. So you can pre-order at 360. So you're paying 360 USD per data point, which again, if you have the engineering capability, may not make sense.
Mhm.
But the goal of this device is to simplify the integration side. So if you have someone who doesn't have the extensive knowledge like we've showcased on the live build, this could be the solution for you, right? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree. I think that there are certainly opportunities for devices like these. I've certainly leveraged devices like these in the past. I guess one more kind of specific question before we move on, and I had this conversation off the stream at some point in the last handful of weeks. Do you think MQTT is seeing enough adoption that MQTT is the correct protocol of choice to have on a device like this? Or do you see more people leveraging an OPC UA, OPC DA, some sort of other still open, but more, I'll just call it widely used protocol?
I still see a lot more OPC being used on the
Mhm.
plant floor, at least with my customers. But I always say that I don't think the protocol matters as much as certain people want to say it does. I really think that you can accomplish, not, and again, I'm throwing out a percentage that may not be completely correct, but 90% of the tasks you want to do with either protocol, right? So that's why maybe I sometimes disagree with the statement use the right tool for the job, because I think you can use both of them to accomplish the exact same thing. The programming might be a little bit different. The scaling, if you go from 100 tags to 100,000 tags, might be different. But I think those are very unique edge cases that not a lot of manufacturers face. And
Mhm.
so for something as simple as just monitoring your lines, getting your OEE metrics, and even sending a few fault codes from your processes, you can use either algorithm or any protocol. It doesn't really matter. And I've personally accomplished either one with either protocol. So
Absolutely.
that's my thought.
I would agree with that. I have had conversations in the last couple of months, both on the sides of, hey, can we leverage MQTT to push device and sensor information up into the brokers that we currently have, as well
Mhm.
as, hey, there aren't nearly as many people leveraging MQTT as some of us talking heads on the internet might make folks think. So that there are certainly a variety of different protocols in that are going around, but I am happy to see that there are more devices leveraging MQTT, and I'd have to do a little bit more digging to see what Chris and his group has created. But I think that we will continue to see the adoption of MQTT in a variety of different locations. Excuse me, and I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vlad.
I was gonna say, I think that the interesting aspect of the MQTT versus OPC discussion is that OPC is primarily an industrial protocol, right? And although it has
Hmm.
vast adoption in our space, I think if you look outside, MQTT is the dominant player, right? And I think that's also important to recognize, because I think what that builds is, well, obviously more adoption and more people sort of learning communication protocols are more familiar with MQTT, but it also brings different perspectives and documentation to our industry, right? So if there
Hmm.
are IoT devices, right? So non-industrial Internet of Things devices that use MQTT in connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles that now cross over to industrial, they're going to be all in MQTT. I don't think that that data is going to be on OPC. And the similar, parallel can be drawn why, maybe Arduino entered the industrial space. They have huge adoption in, electronics and embedded systems. So I think they're trying to leverage their sort of like accumulated knowledge of the space so that can probably transition. Again, that's a debate in itself.
Hmm.
But I think it's important not to underestimate what the adoption of MQTT is outside of the industrial space and how it's going to sort of, in my opinion, only grow in manufacturing.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. And so Francisco threw up a comment in here. We are now quoting Chat GTP live on our shows, Vlad. So this is the era that we have come to. So thank you for that. I think you're the first person to do that in chat, Francisco. But he is saying IIoT, according to Chat GPT, is known as the industrial internet or Industry 4.0, referring to the integration of IoT technology into industrial settings, processes. IoT connection, or I'm sorry, technology consists of interconnected devices, systems, and um, it cut off what we've got that communicate with each other to collect, analyze, and exchange data. The goal of IIoT is to improve efficiency, productivity, and overall performance in industrial operations. So, absolutely, thank you for that comment there, Francisco. I would agree to certainly to some extent, although I would specifically say that IIoT and Industry 4.0 are different buzzwords in and of themselves, and you can leverage IIoT technology to help get to that Industry 4.0, that overall connectedness of a factory. I personally don't think that they are exactly the same, but I think that the goals are generally similar, and how you get there in different ways. But I
Mhm.
do want to continue to move forward. So the next conversation we had with Dave Eifert of Phoenix Contact. Now, Vlad, I don't think was here for this section, but Vlad knows Dave exceptionally well. They've done a bunch of work together, including on the Solus PLC, PLC Next course. Vlad, do the Vanna White thing and show everyone the PLC Next behind you. So as Vlad is doing that, we had an awesome conversation with Dave Karim, who you guys may or may not know, was on. And we had an awesome conversation, especially about sustainability and the reason why Phoenix is kind of driving those sustainability conversations and kind of the importance of sustainability. Now, between this and the conversation that we just had with Russ and Clint, it is, to the best of my recollection, Phoenix Contact, I think as a company, at least at their manufacturing facilities, they are carbon neutral. And I think they are collecting somewhere between 70 and 90% of their own energy from a variety of different locations. And so I'd say that we had a really interesting conversation. Vlad, I don't know if you know, but Dave had spent some time in the powered industry and the process industry earlier in his career. And so we had some fairly technical things. Actually, this would have been a great point for you to have a very long conversation on power factor correction, which to anyone doesn't know, we'll talk a bit more of that as we get into the live build shortly. So I think that I think that it is a really I think that it was a really interesting conversation. Vlad, I don't know if you had any thoughts or questions, or you wanted to kind of make some comments about your previous conversations with Dave, so that I just don't go for 7 to 10 minutes all by myself.
No, I mean, I guess like my only comment is I've worked with Dave in the past on a small like demo project, which I think like Phoenix has showcased a couple of times, and it illustrates a similar stack, that you can leverage for IIoT, which is essentially using their PLC Next, as you've mentioned, Dave, to collect sensor data and then send that over MQTT to a broker, and then ultimately be able to publish that. I think that, and we'll get into this a little bit in the live build, you can also see that data directly on the edge device. So I think that Dave is certainly someone who I would trust a lot on the space. He knows a lot about the PLC Next platform, but he talked a lot also during the previous ICC, and I was hoping to see him at Automate to demo the project that they've built. But I know that they certainly, and when I say they, it's Phoenix Contact, has a lot of knowledge in the IoT space. And I don't know the numbers myself about the energy monitoring that you've mentioned, but it's quite impressive, I guess, to say the least. And I know that they're pushing even harder in the years to come. So that's quite interesting, and I hope that they make maybe some of those numbers or some of those dashboards accessible for external viewership. But I think that we may bring them back and maybe have them showcase some of it in the near future.
Absolutely. I will throw out a couple of numbers because Dave had a really great story over at the PLC Next facility over in Europe. I believe it is in the Phoenix Contact facility in Germany. They wanted to start on the sustainability part, and a lot of the stuff that Phoenix does kind of leverages what they do internally before they're able to kind of go roll it out and use themselves as test cases. So for the PLC Next facility, they picked the top X number of kind of large energy consuming machines. They use somewhere between 3 and 5% of the IO that they have. So they have approximately 100,000 IO in that facility, and so they used 3 to 5,000 IO. They collected that data, and then from extrapolating on that data, they were fairly easily able to go save somewhere between about 10 and 30% of the power that those machines consumed exceptionally easily, which I imagine would be a fairly strikingly high number of dollars high number of dollars in like kilowatt hours. And then beyond that, kind of one of the very interesting things is they were able to take that data because it was clean, known good data. They were able to pass it over to a data scientist of some sort, and that data scientist was able to go look at what their processes were and increase throughput of the facility by an additional 10%, which is amazing. It is amazing. It is certainly something that I would like to see firsthand, both at the facility but also kind of go through the case study, because I think that is, I mean, that's groundbreaking, right? Like, we know groups who would, I don't know, do some very terrible things just to find an additional 10% throughput, much less go and save, I don't know, 10 to 30% of the energy that most of their machines are using and find an additional 30% throughput. So I think that was an amazing story.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know what changes they made exactly, and I don't know if they would be willing to share sort of all the information and put it in the open. But yeah, it's very interesting, like how these projects go down, and I think like me and you have certainly been part of them as well. But I think it's different, from facility to facility, and I'm certainly not as knowledgeable in their like electronics space. I'm assuming they have a lot of pick and place machinery, maybe some injection molding machinery, but I think there's a TBD tour that a couple of them have offered us. So maybe we can shed some light, so to speak, and understand a little bit better their process and ultimately what kind of modifications or adjustments they've made to the facility to gain those percentage points.
Absolutely. So I would say that this is the facility over in Europe. I have
Mhm.
been to the facility over in the US outside of Harrisburg. I think Vlad and I are working on finding a way to bring the show back to the facility in Harrisburg, perhaps when it's a little bit warmer outside than it was last time I was there. But our goal is to bring the show back to get some more behind the scenes. I think that could be super interesting. Would also love the ability to go check out the European Phoenix Contact, or I assume that there are more than one Phoenix Contact manufacturing facilities. But again, I just do want to hammer on the point that this was a European initiative. We will talk a bit more about that with episode 105, because we had Russ and Clint on, and they are from the US side, and we talked a bit more specifically about the US side. So again, thanks to Dave for going and showcasing a bunch of that on there. As we said when he was live, and I guess Vlad missed him, so we'll have to bring him on at some point soon. There are some guests that we have been bringing on that I don't know how it took quite as many episodes for us to get into the show in order to bring them on for the first time. So again, thank you to Dave for that. Hopefully, when we are able to make the tour, we can get a Dave and a Zach and an Ira live on tour and on camera, and be able to do some stuff at that facility. Maybe Vlad will go to Hershey's Park and get some chocolate while we are there as well.
Awesome.
Probably very different than the European chocolate. And then but before we transition to episode 104, I do want to make a couple of quick notes. One, if you guys have somehow missed it, I'm heading to Hanover April 17th through the 22nd. I will be over in Germany at Hanover Messe. I will be with the folks in Litmus. If you guys are listening to this and you guys listen in Europe or watching on Clip, we are Hall 17, booth F18. We're right next to Google. I'm going to be there, going to do a lot of live content, going to do a lot of content that I will go bring back with you guys. Have a couple of interviews that we are looking to set up. Still a bit to be determined with that, but I'm very excited about that. So if you or your company are there, would like to come welcome me for, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes in the booth, we can go have some conversations. We'll go shoot some content for the show. Would love to be able to go find a way to make that happen. Talking about Phoenix Contact, I'm hoping to go to the Phoenix Contact booth, get some good interviews. I have been told that Phoenix and Siemens, and if you guys are long-term listeners of the show, you know that we've got really good relationships with both. Basically, small villages worth of trade show booths, and there's this mythical second floor. And so the goal is to get to the second floor of both of those without just making a run for it and getting thrown out of the show. Absolutely. So I'm excited to do that. So if you guys are over there, that would be awesome. Yeah, if you guys are over there, that would be awesome. Certainly hoping to bring a bunch of that content and perhaps some of what our European manufacturing brethren doing back to this show and back to the folks in the US. So I'm very excited for that. Having said that, let's go transition to episode 104, Vlad. We had Becca and Ryan on. And having Becca and Ryan, so those were a couple of really great conversations. We almost unintentionally kind of doubled down into the energy monitoring from that point. So a bit of background. Becca works for, I believe it's Energy Insight, which is the Indiana state-run program, which helps to go leverage a device, right? Kind of a platform. They are currently on the Opto 22. I don't know if they're Rios or Rio Emus. That they're parsing the information via MQTT up to an ignition cloud, and the state of Indiana is giving it to you for free, right? So if you are a Indiana small to medium sized manufacturer, please go take advantage of this opportunity. It is super, yeah, it is super exciting. Absolutely free for the first year. I think it's less than $15,000 a year after that. Their goal is to get some of this kind of next generation Industry 4.0 technology into the hands of everyone who would and could be using it, and to help bring some of that technology into the smaller manufacturing sides. What was your thoughts about that, Vlad?
I think it's a very interesting initiative. I was gonna say, on the stack and the initiative side, from my understanding, they don't just provide you with the hardware and software; they also kind of guide you right through the process. I don't know if it's putting you together with maybe industry consultants or someone who has done it, or they do it themselves, but ultimately they help you install the hardware, and then they help you also understand the data that's coming through and make decisions. Again, I don't know what that entails exactly from A to Z, but my understanding is that it's a little bit more than just sort of letting you run with the solution. But I did want to make a comment because again, this solution leverages MQTT. We had a comment from Francisco who made a comment of MQTT versus OPC, and that's something we talked a little bit earlier. But in a nutshell, right? So if you have a server with a device that is running MQTT, that device is going to automatically push data on change to the server. Versus OPC, the server needs to poll the device in order to see what the current data state is. And again, like there's a lot more complexity to both protocols and how they're set up. I think that there's a lot of resources on both. I know that on Solus we have an OPC UA course that covers the protocol. MQTT is fairly well documented, and I think it's relatively easy to get going, as we've demonstrated in the live build, as well as there's plenty of free resources, right? So HiveMQ has a public broker that you can use at no cost, be able to publish any amount of data. I don't know if there's any limit, to be honest with you, with Dave, because I think you can
There
set it
is.
up to different endpoints. Huh? There
There
is?
on the free tier. On the free tier, there is.
No, but I think so on the free tier, I think you get a private broker for you, but then there's a public broker that you don't even need to register for You literally just get an IP address from HiveMQ, and obviously your data that way is completely open and anybody could see it. But if you want to just learn the protocol, if you want to publish a couple of things from, like a Siemens Opto Phoenix device, then it is at no cost. But in any case, I think that that's the difference between the protocols in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. The costs are different, right? Once you, if you're, let's say, developing hardware on either protocol, the costs are different, and the setup is going to be different on the server as well. But yeah, so that just to come back maybe to the episode, or any thoughts, Dave, on the
I
protocols?
was gonna say, I think you kind of hit that well, Francisco, and I'll go pull the comment back up again. Had made the comment about store and forward. I would say store and forward is absolutely more of an architectural thing. Like you should use and or leverage what store and forward looks like. You can do store and forward with both MQTT and OPC UA. That's more of an architecture thing and having hardware at a location in order to be able to quite literally store, right? So when we talk about edge devices, lots of edge devices have the ability to leverage store and forward for the reasons of, hey, we might not be in the best connectivity of an area, and if we're not in the best connectivity of an area, we need to be able to store and forward to make sure that we don't lose data.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And again, there's a lot of an entire conversation to be had about the stack that you would use, and I think it's again coming back to that question. I think in reality, it's a mix and match, right? So a lot of the devices, let's say, get OPC data, then they're gonna transmit that or package that, process that, transmit that over MQTT, or vice versa. Like it's not
Mhm.
always as cut and dry as one may think. There's tons of devices that even internally would collect data from their own hardware over OPC, right? So you're pulling over
Yes.
OPC and then you can send that out over MQTT or whatever. But anyways, I think there's a lot to be said on how it can be done. And again, my opinion is that you can get the same data that you can make decisions with on either one, right? But in certain edge cases, which again we can discuss, you may prefer one versus the other. So,
I think that that is a very good way to put that. And without having a literally 90-minute conversation slash argument about this, I think that this is a very good place to hit the pause on MQTT versus OPC UA. But no,
yeah.
but back to our conversation on episode 104. I do want to point out a couple of things on this. We initially talked about what this Energy Insights um option look like all the way back on episode 67. We had Arlen Nipper on. Arlen and Cirrus Link, his organization, were part, especially on the MQTT side, were part of this. And so very interesting kind of overall how they built it up, as we will kind of get into on the live build. Very similar to the way that we showcased what our proof of concept looks like. And a huge shout out and thank you to Ryan for coming on. Ryan runs Axiom. He initially, or he in his previous life, had run a large systems integration organization. He had spent a bunch of time working with Energy Insights, and as he transitioned out of systems integration into Axiom, continues to work on the technical side with that group. We also had a bunch of interesting conversations about solar and sustainability. Ryan, for anyone who doesn't know, has put up a bunch of solar on the barn that he has, and I think they do a fair amount of the energy um that they use at the house with just the solar panels that they put up, which led us to this strange conversation of Vlad's energy cost being too low per kilowatt hour for solar to ever make sense. So we're probably not going to convince Vlad to move off of hydropower onto solar power. I mean, and for anyone who knows Vlad, they know that he's got a ton of free time on his hands. And yeah, he's got a ton of free time on his hands and can absolutely go ahead and leverage a variety of other things to just go take tens or hundreds of hours of his time. But no, I would say that this was kind of overall super awesome, really great conversation. Loved all the conversations on sustainability. Becca's previous life was working for the power utility, And so again, she and Vlad got into we got into a bit of the technicals, right? We talked again about power factor correction and how that is a really good step and opportunity. We talked about how sometimes many organizations don't know what their power bills look like, um, and with just kind of the most basic of energy monitoring, they're able to go ahead and leverage a hey, we can go save a significant amount of money, and that significant amount of money could just be because the utility hasn't done a good job of giving them the power that they should have, and being able to go push back has saved. I think she's worked with a couple of organizations to save thousands or tens of thousands of dollars over the course
Mhm.
of a month. Do you have any other thoughts or comments on episode 104, Vlad?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think I had mentioned it during the episode too. I think that it would be interesting to bring someone with the sort of like the utility company knowledge uh, in a conversation around how they view energy usage, right? So I know on the residential side, for example, there's a lot of programs that incentivize reduction of power. I know that depending on where you live, you should be able to sell the power back to the utility company. I think Becca mentioned a couple of things where they're not too keen on you selling that energy back. But either way, I guess like I would like to really understand what that energy is like, because I certainly have monitored energy coming in, and I've certainly worked on projects that were aimed at reducing power consumption, but I don't have as much of a visibility of what that perspective looks like from a power grid company. And I think it's also going to vary country by country, state by state, even possibly. But again, I'm curious about their interests and goals when it comes to these initiatives, or again, like power reduction, and maybe some of the challenges that they're involved with as well would be really interesting.
Absolutely. I think that would be interesting. I don't particularly have that person, especially with the industrial power knowledge off the top of my head. So I will go
Mhm.
throw it out. If you guys are someone with this industrial power knowledge and can speak openly and fairly candidly about what that looks like, please let us know. Yeah, please let us know. We would certainly love to find the opportunity to have that conversation. And then moving on to the next conversation we had, Vlad's most stressful time of the month of March was our live build. A little bit of a recap for the live build is we wanted to go showcase kind of a proof of concept, minimum viable product style. How quickly can we go start monitoring energy? And because we're a manufacturing hub and we can't do anything simply as going ahead and just doing that, we had Francisco carry on. He is over in Australia right now, so he had an Opto 22 Emo Rio Emo. uh Benson's gonna kill me because I always get the name of their products inverted. Vlad, he had a Rio Emu with a current transducer in Australia. He went and he plugged that into his kettle. He parsed that information via MQTT to an ignition broker that lived in the cloud in Ecuador. And then we had a couple of ASE, Richard from ASE Automation Solutions Ecuador, my partner on the ignition side, did a fair amount of kind of just live ignition development. He went and we created, I believe it was a UDT. We got a widget going. We created, I think, 3 or 4 screens. We had some ad hoc trending and a bunch of other stuff. And most importantly, very easily made that MQTT connection to what Francisco had over in Australia, and was real time going ahead and pulling that power. And then we had Esteban was over in Germany. He was traveling in Germany because why not? Let's go ahead and add a fourth continent as we're going through this. And so all 4 of us were able to go pull up the trending and go showcase what the trend. That was the super kind of overview of that. If you guys have not watched and or listened to that, I 100% must for people to go ahead and watch and or listen to what that looks like. That was a super fun time. I know Vlad was super worried about it going in. Vlad, are you now a believer that people can successfully live build stuff most of the way across the world live on the internet?
I mean, Dave, as I told you many times, I've always believed it's possible. I just when you show me that person and the build a few days before, I get a little nervous because I think like planning's everything, and I certainly know that Francisco has planned this for a while. I just didn't know what it looked like until the very last moment, and I know that things tend to go poorly if there is no planning. So
I promise you, you had it, Vlad. I know you had some other life going on to prevent us from getting together a little bit earlier, but I think that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I guess other than going and driving people to that, do you have any other thoughts or comments on the show that we had with the live build?
yeah, I mean, I think that's a solution that you will see very commonly.
Mhm.
What Francisco has built is a, how to say it, like a common stack that you would want to gather data with. I think that it's important to mention also you could probably simplify that in my mind if you had a Groove Rio or an Opto 22 Rio, you could run Ignition directly on it, right? So you could probably not have the cloud capability, but you could see the data at your facility if you wanted to maybe reduce the cost of a cloud solution. But as you
Mhm.
scale, I think it becomes important to do what Francisco has shown because ultimately there is, how to say it, a restriction of collecting, storing, and then processing all the data on an edge device.
Mhm.
But ultimately, yeah, I think the goal was to show a proof of concept, not certainly a final, product, but something that is usable. And Dave, in my conversations with people from Solus PLC, from my clients, certainly get questions. And again, this would be primarily coming from engineers who get asked, well, we would like to see what the level of a tank is or what the temperature of a tank is, right? So this has not gotten to a very large scale where it's a new factory construction where we can pour in a lot of money, but that engineer is just looking to do a proof of concept. And so I always recommend to them exactly what Francisco has built and to show like a few data points to the manager and say like, hey, here's your phone, type in the IP address. We've done it on computers, but it could have been just as easily pulled
Mhm.
up on a cell phone because ultimately it was just an open gateway and you can see the data being trended live. You can very easily tie in, certain alerts and ignition. So again, I want to make sure people understand we've painted a picture of a proof of concept that can be extended quite indefinitely and can be
Mhm.
made much prettier. And I would certainly would want to maybe go through that exercise with Francisco and his team at one point in time. I don't know if we do a different project altogether, but again, I think there's a lot more that can be done uh, through that demo. But I really like it.
Absolutely. No. I would say that we wanted to do something that could be built again by a team of experts in about an hour, which you're able to do, which was awesome. To the Ignition Edge comment that you made, you can certainly get Ignition Edge on an Opto and on
Mhm.
some other devices. I will say that to Francisco in the chat's earlier point, that is a great device, great solution for store and forward, right? So I've certainly leveraged store and forward on Ignition Edge a number of times in the past. I would also say that those typically have limited capabilities, limited storage, things like that. If you're looking to
Mhm.
go, you could go into the cloud. I know Inductive Automation, I believe, has officially announced Ignition Cloud, which is a consumption based model. And if you guys are
Has
a
it
facility
released
that
yet? Has it released?
it, I've had conversations around it with people that make me think I don't know. Well, in that case, I may have said something on air that maybe should or is not public, depending upon where you are, I guess. But Ignition Cloud, the goal is to be consumption based. And I would also say that if you guys want to go listen to more about cloud, check out Joseph Davalio from 4IR. They do a lot of managed cloud services. And I've had a couple of conversations after our show with him and his, I believe, business partner, James. Very, very smart group of folks looking to help spin up manages if you guys have a facility who wants to go leverage cloud but doesn't have the internal capability, or maybe you're someone like me who could, in theory, go do it, but doesn't particularly want to have involved and doesn't have to go. We can certainly have a conversation with our partners down with Francisco and our partners at sea. We have talked about, hey, what does the next level of some of these builds look like? They are also doing a bunch of really interesting cloud-based solutions and leveraging a variety of cloud-based solutions, especially on like temperature, humidity, energy monitoring for an easy visualization up into your device that you are looking for. I big the build is information development. I've done work. I recommend and have a Sabon's contact information down below. If you guys are in South America or Latin America, if you guys are in North America looking for some help on ignition, and I haven't talked to you in the last couple of weeks since we've had this conversation, please feel free to go ahead and send me a note. Would be a conversation to see how we can help you guys deploy and develop at your facility. Any other comments about the build other than people should go watch it?
No, I think it was great.
Awesome. Perfect. So I do want to take just a brief moment again to thank our sponsors over at Phoenix Contact. So we've been doing an ad read on the All Electric Society kind of all month long, and I guess I have a couple of thoughts on it. One, super European name. I personally love it. I love how they very much are seemingly practice what they preach when it comes to the All Electric Society. We will get to official episode 105 in just a moment when we get to Russ and Clint. Have gotten to that conversation about Russ and Clint. If you guys have Contact USA facility out in Harrisburg, they have an entire rooftop of solar. I believe the solar number is 2,135 solar panels up on the top of their roof. I'd imagine they're 200 or 300 watts. It's a huge solar array. Very fantastic. Jack was in the comments talking about different ways that they can continue to leverage that capture, as well as some other turbine and other opportunities to be able to go ahead more energy, which, if you guys haven't heard, very much something that is of a personal interest to me, and I've spent a lot of time on the internet and other places researching and looking into and doing some of that. Having spoken about that, I think that this is a slightly good transition to go mention a couple of things that we're going to do at Automate. So Vlad, I guess if you guys missed Automation Ladies last week, Vlad 100% on the internet committed to coming to Automate. He was it looks like, but Vlad is going to come to Automate. I am planning to be at Automate. At least I will be doing some interesting kind of builds and other stuff with the folks at the Phoenix Contact booth for at least a couple of days in the afternoon. We've got some other plans that are all a bit to be determined. So everyone go ahead and stay tuned for that as we have more information and content coming out with that. But again, thank you to the folks at Phoenix Contact for sponsoring this theme, for giving us a bunch of amazing guests, and for just being porters of the community. Having said that, let's go ahead and transition to episode 105. So last Wednesday, we had Clint and Russ on from Phoenix Contact. Clint is the product manager, deals with a lot of the energy monitoring solutions in there. I think we threw out it might have been with Russ. We threw out a couple of DCCs and some other hardware that Vlad does not currently own. Gone on the bought some more hardware, but I will say that Russ is here working on actually delivering energy monitoring and energy saving solutions within Phoenix Contact themselves. And so we had some great conversations. Vlad, what were your main takeaways from that?
So I guess first of all, we've learned about some building automation hardware with which I was not familiar before. So you've mentioned that. I think that they're working on a number of projects. Again, we talked, I think, a little bit more off camera. So I certainly enjoyed understanding a little bit more of what they're doing at Phoenix Contact. But I think you've mentioned some of the end results. They're working on a number of initiatives to reduce their footprint. What I find really interesting again is that they are using their own hardware and software
Mm-hmm.
to better themselves, which I think is the ultimate proof, right? So I think that's certainly very interesting. And we talked about a number, I think, of different initiatives that they even see outside of their facilities that have taken place. And I think one example that was mentioned is the New York metro system, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was Clint who brought that up. It's a case study that they've published on their website. I actually read through it a little bit, but they are using PLC Next, I believe, to monitor the temperature of rails, and they've been able to reduce the number of incidents related to rails icing over in the colder months by doing so, which in the past had to be a manual activity. So I think that's a prime example of an IIoT solution for a practical problem.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't think that we have the full kind of source code of what that looks like, but I would certainly, from like an engineering standpoint, would be really cool to see what that looks like. And again, I think it's even more so interesting from a metro infrastructure standpoint than even the Phoenix site, because I think that I understand what they did with the controllers, but I'm very confused by some of the probably older protocols and infrastructure that the New York metro system employs, which probably took a lot of effort to untangle before they could integrate what they did. But I think it's really cool.
Absolutely. I will say, I believe in the example they were saying that because it is a potential catastrophic failure
Mhm.
for light rails to ice up, sometime in, I don't know, September or October, they would go and manually turn on the heaters for those rails at every station. And those would just stay on until, I don't know, April. And I think the energy cost, they were about $25,000 a day. I believe the number was something around $40 million of savings on energy, because we can go easily toggle those on and off depending upon what actual weather looks like, as opposed to just going and running them at 100% the whole time. So I thought that that was interesting.
How do you
I
even
think that
heat rails? How do you like? What's a like? Is it a contact heater? And like I don't know. I'm just like curious about the details. You know what I mean? Of how this is actually implemented in the field. But anyways.
Yeah, so I mean, I would imagine that this was delivered very, very like decades ago, right? So I would
Mhm.
imagine we are just dumping a bunch of heat. I can't imagine it's just current. So I would imagine that we are dumping a bunch of heat onto rails in a variety of different places every X number of feet. And it may just
Mhm.
be we've got positive, negative wires. We push, they are like twisted together so they create heat, and we just
So it's
shove them up
resistors.
against the rails.
Okay.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
Could you?
I
I'm just curious. I'm brainstorming here. Could you not use the entire rail as a massive resistor? But I guess that would create heat maybe in concentrated areas, which would not be ideal. But anyways, yeah, it's interesting. I'd be curious. Again, that system probably also has been put in place, decades ago. So anyways, it's an
yeah.
interesting
I
engineering challenge, I suppose.
I will say I'd like everyone in the chat to go throw a thumbs up if one of their favorite parts of the show is Vlad demanding everyone just completely share their source code of every project that they've ever done. I think we've
I
had that a
want all the
couple of times.
diagrams.
I understand you want all the diagrams, Vlad. And I want to give you all the diagrams. So that's why I'm asking chat to go give us some thumbs up in the chat if that is also what they would like. But no, I thought it was interesting. I think it was our first conversation on this show that involved BackNet. And a variety of other building automation stuff. I have said this a couple of times in the past. I worked for a distributor manufacturer's rep, and one of the things that we did while we were there is we worked with a bunch of building automation and process automation, process controls work. So BackNet was a fairly standard communication protocol that our end users would go ahead and demand. So it's interesting, and I think that as we get further into this, we will absolutely 100% see more integration and demand between the legacy building automation and the controls work that we do, especially if we're looking at energy and sustainability. And then we get to, water, power, airflow monitoring, in addition to the temperature, humidity, vibration, etc., that we already see. So I think that it will be very interesting the advantages that we see as we go moving through everything and potentially get to the point of, hey, we're running one ecosystem. We should absolutely go ahead and run one ecosystem. I do want to make a comment because we teased it a bit earlier. So Russ going through doing some of this energy monitoring on site at Phoenix itself, his comment was very much a, hey, one of the things that we were doing, kind of running in parallel with Germany, was saying, hey, we've got to go monitor this. And so they were actually able to go leverage the energy monitoring like software solutions that had already been built in Germany so that they didn't have to replicate that over in the US. And I think that that is a huge opportunity that honestly I see many corporates mostly fail on, Vlad, because they are in the point of, we are going to go do this at once and we should do it on all of the sites, but everyone does something slightly different. So instead of making one system really good, we've got, I don't know, 2 to 36 systems that are like mediocre at best. So I'd like to commend them for what they are doing, very much practicing what they're preaching. And I believe, again, it was Clint's comments that, hey, these are some really great examples because we are able to go leverage what we're doing on site and go talk to the customers. And because we are leading the way through energy and through sustainability, and because we can showcase real life examples of saving tens or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on power and energy solutions, we are able to go have exceptionally compelling case studies and conversations with our end users.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, Dave. And I guess maybe I can share a story or a thought on this without again mentioning the end user who kind of shared this information. But I think if we get into the management side of manufacturing, what you will see is that the KPIs that you would see at the plant level don't always align with the KPIs that you'd see at the corporate level. So what I've seen
Mhm.
happen is if you have, let's say, four facilities that make the exact same product, and although they should be supporting each other, the plant manager has a KPI which is based on how cheaply you can produce a product, right? So let's say if he talks to me and you, and we're able to decrease that price, I don't know, let's say from $3 down to $2 with whatever system or initiative we implement, then he's de-incentivized to share that information because then he's the one who holds a lot of how to say, like, power as the best plant out of the four plants for the organization. So you would think that he would be incentivized to share it, but I've seen actually the opposite in place in reality.
I I think that that goes all back to its incentives and alignment. And I had this conversation
Sure.
on LinkedIn, maybe over the weekend or last week, right? Of talking about time and materials workers, and I saw this super funny YouTube Shorts video in which the crew had been dogging it, right? And they're saying, "Hey, we haven't had literally any work to do in the last 4 days. This is like literally the welder. He is painting. He's got a paintbrush and he's painting. And we are just looking busy because it's a super open-ended time and materials contract. And because there is a misalignment with that, there is no incentive for them to go finish something. They're going to continue to do that. And
Mhm.
there are many misalignments, and if the organization has misalignments at the highest level of saying, hey, we are not going to do anything to incentivize our collective organization to get better, man, that's on them. And that is a huge miss. And it is almost sad that, executives and plant managers and things like that feel like they've got to hoard and bogart this information because they can get, marginally better. But I think it's very much along the lines of the conversations I have, right? So there are lots of groups that are like, hey, I'm going to go build this awesome tool or this awesome widget. It doesn't matter what it is, Vlad, because we're going to get into one major, Fortune 1000. And then as soon as I do a good job at that one major Fortune 1000, I'm going to they're going to just share my information. I'm going to get to every Fortune 1000. And I'm not saying within that company. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, and I'm not saying that people haven't been able to go climb those years, but it's, you think you do a good job at one, the rest of them just like open up like a gold door, and you get to immediately go do it at the others. And that is not the case, because again, it may be plant managers are bogarting this information, or they do a very poor job having conversations or anything like that. And I feel like that is something that absolutely needs to change if we hope to get better at an industry and as an organization, or as if we hope to get better as an industry and organizations hope to get better organizationally.
I would agree.
But no, I guess I feel like we have hit on all of these conversations exceptionally well. Vlad and I could talk about this for hours more. And believe you me, we have talked about energy monitoring very specifically for, I don't know, no less than 20 hours over the course of the last 12 months. Having said that, if you guys want to reach out and have conversations with us, we're always happy to talk about applications and everything else. A little bit of a teaser. Today is April 4th. On April 5th, we start our new theme, sponsored by Litness. Vatsal Shah is coming in. He is the founder and CEO. If you guys haven't had any conversations or know him, he is an absolute. I've had a number of conversations with him. IoT world, which we talked about all about data and the realities of data towards the end of last year. So you guys should absolutely go ahead and tune in for that. We are running a little bit earlier than normal. We're going to go live at ghost time for everyone on the lunch side, and we're going to be in your earbuds first thing in the morning on the West Coast side, and we might actually be early enough to catch some Europeans, so you guys come hang out with us tomorrow with that. Having said that, again, thank you guys for hanging out, talking all things data-driven sustainability with us all over the course of March and today. If you are still watching, please go ahead and follow Manufacturing Hub. We're almost to 2,000 followers, which is pretty awesome, mostly because we don't really ask for people to follow us, which is kind of please go ahead and subscribe to Solus PLC. Everyone on Solus always watching us, and Solus PLC, by the way, is the place that you want to go to catch all of the video restreams. We've had a number of people ask, especially on the live stream, hey, where can I go watch this? The best place to go to watch all of the full video streams is on Solus PLC's YouTube channel. So please go ahead and check that out. If you guys are hanging out listening in your AirPods or earbuds, go ahead and hit that like button, hit the follow button, rate us 5 stars in all of the places that you can do it. Believe it or not, I have found that when I ask for people to like and subscribe, people like and subscribe, and that means more of you get the opportunity to listen to us. But no, I would say with that, again, thanks everyone for hanging out. We will be a little bit shorter, just slightly over an hour at this point, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. But talk to you soon. Bye-bye.